Who's afraid of Virginia? Who's afraid of Virginia? Apparently, Hillary Clinton was very afraid and not ashamed to let everyone know it, who was listening and able to hear it. And for those adept in the analysis of politics, just a glance at the voting results alarmed them as to how far she went to assuage her fears and guarantee a favorable result. And why was she crying after the election? Big girls don't cry. Perhaps her zeal and ambition that blinded her made her forget about the rule of politics as the founder of the Democratic Party, Andrew Jackson, established long ago. To the victor go the spoils of war. And she realized suddenly that she had not been crowned the queen, and there would be no coronation, no continuation of a political dynasty. And that meant that she might have to pay for her transgressions in that pursuit for power. She began to see herself in those orange jumpsuits that her opponents often portrayed her in. And she had to begin to face not her fantasy dream, but a potential reality that was not pleasant to her. And she cried. And she cried. And she cried. For over a decade, Virginia has been a reliable state, Old Faithful, to add to the Democrat Electoral College vote count, despite being denominated as a battleground state that has predicted the victor in 70% of elections since 1912. And the battle for the Old Dominion state for over a decade has been won or lost in just one of 11 total congressional districts, making the 8th congressional district in Northern Virginia's suburb of D.C. the kingmaker. But as late as May 2016, the ruler of the fiefdom, Congressman Donald Esquire Jr., was telling the press that he was very concerned as to whether or not he could deliver the votes for the Democratic presidential nominee, whoever that might be. And he told the Washington Post that he was not taking anything for granted. But apparently, party leaders remain confident that the favorite son and political giant, who was named as finance chairman of the DCCC while still a freshman legislator, and who was appointed to the premier ambassadorship post in Switzerland and Liechtenstein before being handpicked to succeed the former incumbent legislator, would deliver. And accordingly, for his reward, many were placing his name on the very top of the list to succeed Senator Tim Kaine when he became vice president, as everyone seemed to expect. And on November 8th, 2016, Hillary Rodham Clinton did indeed win all of the 13 electoral college votes in Virginia, capturing over 48% of the popular vote by original unofficial count. This was one of the lowest victory margins by any Democrat in history. Across the state, federal prosecutors have charged or arrested many illegal immigrants who attempted to vote on Election Day. And prior to the election, Governor Terry McAuliffe attempted to re-enfranchise thousands of felons, including some on death row, but met sharp rebuff by the Republican-controlled legislature. But all of this pales in comparison to the level of corruption and fraud that took place in Virginia's 8th congressional district, one of the most reliable Democrat districts in the South that regularly decides the victor in statewide and presidential contests, even this year, making Virginia the only Southern state to vote for Mrs. Clinton. In the 8th congressional district, not only did Mrs. Clinton win enough votes to win the statewide contest, where she marked a historical low, but won in the most diverse district in the Commonwealth while breaking a historical high record with 74%, as reported immediately after the election. despite nationwide discontent with all of the presidential nominees that persuaded many not to vote, including one of the most reliable constituencies, African Americans who came out in droves for President Barack Obama in prior elections, who simply decided this year to stay home. But in the 8th Congressional District, Mrs. Clinton beat the election tallies of Barack Obama, contrary to what happened in every other district in the state and in the country. There is just something wrong with that report. Yet the local and state boards of elections, with practically no voiced objections except that of Mike Webb, an independent conservative who ran as a write-in for U.S. Congress, rubber stamped the vote tallies and certified the results, contrary to the intent of the legislature when it implemented certification provisions under Virginia Statute Section 22.2-675 et sec. They wanted them to do more than just rubber stamp what someone had said before. Significantly, neither local Democrat nor Republican leaders voiced an objection to the discordant, incongruent, and irreconcilable results, dispositively signaling fraudulent conduct and indicating by their silence that a deal had been made. Significantly, in this obvious attempt to ignore the true voice of Virginians, the self-described moderate Republican nominee, Charles Hernick, waged relentless attack in the press and on social media throughout the primary and general election against both Donald Trump and Mike Webb, who the press repeatedly described as a Christian and unabashed conservative, but leveled no attacks against the incumbent Congressman Beyer or Mrs. Clinton. This strategy of running against the president-elect nationwide appears not to have been the best choice, because contrary to press speculation, Mr. Trump did in fact do far better among ethnic minorities, including Muslims and African Americans and Hispanics, than Mitt Romney, and was on par in many respects with George W. Bush. Moreover, waging a campaign in which the incumbent congressman claimed he would not rely on conventional wisdom and stated that he was not going to take any chances to the Washington Post, Governor Terry McAuliffe personally attended, at his behest, the anniversary of the pastor of the largest church in the district, the historically black Alfred Street Baptist Church, which boasts over 7,000 members, and where President Barack Obama had attended Easter service 1 year before, preparing the way as the advance man for the Democratic campaign. Shortly prior to the election, Reverend Howard John Wesley, the pastor of that church, announced to his membership an exclusive opportunity for their members to attend a private viewing before Christmas of the newly opened Museum of African American History at the Smithsonian Institution, where reservations to the general public are closed until February 2017. The members of the church, reflecting the Old Testament tradition, were chosen by lots, were selected by lottery, and enjoyed a private viewing of a promised land on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. It was called an anniversary celebration after that church celebrated its 213th anniversary. Does every church celebrating over 2 centuries get this honor? Or, like George Orwell's Animal Farm, are we all created equal, even if some animals are created more equal than others? Cock-a-doodle doo. Cock-a-doodle doo. While it is true that the historic black church did give the Smithsonian Museum an incredible donation of $1 million, unprecedented in the history of the museum and its development program, does that monetary gift open doors for everyone for a private viewing, even where that church was graciously courted for that amount to lead the way. Had that church not just had tickets made available for its youth ministry in October, had not its membership just been a part of the opening celebration and countdown, how much does $1 million buy at the Smithsonian gift shop? If not just an early visit from a president on Easter morning, courting favor, and a governor late in the fall, extending kind congratulations. Even the Smithsonian admits to the press that they capitalized greatly on the election of an African-American president to raise the required funds to open the historic museum, almost as blatantly as one Republican candidate for Congress told the press that he was hustling his fellow Hispanics for their votes in a monster match election year. So how much influence might a favorite son named, coincidentally, Buyer and political giant Inspire, with a family fortune and personal net worth of over $48 million, who remained suspiciously and conspicuously absent from all of these precursory activities. A congressman who does not want a selfie with his president or his governor? Is that odd or a peculiar institution? Give a man money and watch him act funny, says the character in a Vincent Minnelli film. I have never met in America with anyone so poor as not to cast a glance of hope and envy on the enjoyments of the rich, recorded one French visitor to this country long ago. And did not the temptation for sycophancy inspire an early bromance in an ambitious courtesan for a boardroom, and inspire Machiavellian advice and counsel to a member of a Holy Family Medici to obtain the favor of a patron, even if not a saintly one? So why not the same for a self-described no-low contendere dealer who insisted upon calling the U.S. Embassy where he worked by a telling and troubling name, the dealership? In his defense, Congressman Donald S. Byer Jr. often preaches piously about his commitment to getting the money out of politics. But the only evidence of his getting money out of politics is the lack of his own contributions on federally mandated disclosures. But $2 to $3 million of donations from persons seeking favor at court do appear on those reports. It's just very curious, like his absence from those other activities. But perhaps, just perhaps, these are the things of which fairy tales are made, as said the Archbishop of Canterbury on a warm summer morning when many dreamed that they could indeed come true. And there is probably only a comical remark implied when, as Pastor Wesley said at the Saturday service after the election, with Donald Trump in the White House, I guess we won't be expecting him for Easter any time soon. An obvious reference to the past visit from a former president. And it was perhaps simply the workings of the elements of comedy, timing, delivery, and repetition that made it all the more funny and comical when he repeated it again at the Sunday service. And he claims that that remark, like his message regarding despair and disappointment after an election, does not express a preference, and that a God on a heavenly throne does not care at all who is in the White House. That is his story, and he is sticking to it. And this might seem more genuine and credibly so had he not specifically identified by name particular potential members of a new cabinet with whom he personally was not pleased, like Governor Chris Christie and former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, which only one attendee found cause to retweet about. But even absent that breadcrumb trail for Hansel and Gretel to find their way back to a home of truth, lost in a dark and mysterious wood of words, there is more to light the way. And to thank a God in heaven or providence that this is so, because with these disheartening revelations and illustration of the late Reverend Samuel Proctor, former president of the Virginia Union University and former pastor emeritus of the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, comes to mind, particularly when the character in that illustration looked up and found reason to say, now that the wagon is out here, who is going to bring the wagon back? Who's going to bring the wagon back? On the weekend before the general election, when the pastor asked for a show of hands from those 500 plus members attending a Saturday evening service, over 75% indicated that they had early voted in an absentee voting state where only a limited number of persons based on individual circumstances are permitted to vote early in person or by mail. And on the weekend after the election, he, in disregard for the Johnson Amendment, as he had on previous occasions, even on social media, he attacked verbally President-elect Donald Trump and expressed his great surprise and disappointment in the result, even in a liberation theology encouraging civil disobedience from his congregation members, contrary to the teachings of every philosopher that has spoken on the topic of civil disobedience, from Henry David Thoreau to Martin Luther King, who reserved such extreme protest conduct for matters involving great moral questions, not personal dissatisfaction. And in the absence of unprecedented fraud and corruption, not seen since the days of Tammany Hall, President-elect Trump would have been awarded the 13 Electoral College votes that the Board of Elections certified and awarded to former Secretary of State Clinton. Consequently, his total going into the Electoral College vote on December 19, 2016 is just 290, provided that the Board of Elections does not resolve this controversy and award him the Virginia Electoral College votes to which he is truly entitled on December 13, 2016, for a total of 303. 303. And so say yes to Rule 303 and say no to hate and intolerance. Say yes to Rule 303 and say no to tyranny and demagoguery. Say yes to Rule 303 and say no to injustice. Say yes to Rule 303 and demand that the electors in Virginia abide by the informed dictates of conscience, unbound by a law that would work a disenfranchisement of the voice of Virginia and grave injustice, if not corrected by available state action prior to their vote when they have the opportunity to resolve any controversies on December 13, 2016. And so sign the petition for the side of right and Rule 303, and then tell two friends, and so on, and so on, and so on, and let freedom ring. and let freedom ring, and let freedom ring from every mountaintop, and we shall make America great again. In the final analysis, this is not a matter of color. This is not a matter of ethnicity. This is not a matter of religion. This is not a matter of ideology or of political affiliation. This is simply and plainly a question of right and your rights. And they are wrong. Sic semper tyrannis. Thus, always the tyrants. Hashtag rule real free. Let's make America great again.
Politicians will say anything. Major in the majors. Let's make Americans great again. I am Major Mike Webb. Honest.